Tim Watson from Timography and welcome to our 4th video blog post. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about exposure and achieving correct or a balanced exposure, and also using exposure to create more interesting images if you so desire. We're going to be using the camera light meter and also showing you a couple of different techniques using studio flash meters. So let's get started. Okay, just before we get started, just a quick word. What I'm going to talk about now with exposure, it's what I've found works for me. There are really no hard and fast rules as you must use this technique or that technique. It's what works for you. But what I'll talk about is what I found works really well for me. So we'll get started. Firstly, your camera, of course, has a very good light meter built into it. It can't do everything, but for what it's designed to do, it does it very well. Outdoors photography, indoors, most general shooting applications, the camera's meter works fine. Also, if you're using your hot shoe flash with the ITTL metering on Nikon or ETTL on Canon, they work great. The difference being is when you want to get a little bit creative with your photography, the light meter in your camera can't cope. So we're going to talk about a few things that will do the job for you. Firstly though, before we get started, just a quick rule of thumb to remember, which I found really helps me. For those of you still shooting film, inside of your film canister or your film packet, there is a rule of thumb guide in here. It's called the Sunny 16 rule. What it's talking about basically is that in bright sunlight, with 1/125th shutter speed, f16, you'll get a balanced exposure, and it works really, really well. I've used it lots of times. It's a great rule of thumb. You can tweak it a little bit either way if it's a cloudy day or what have you. But as a rule of thumb, that works really well. Speaking of rule of thumb, another useful tool is something like this slide rule. It's just a visual indicator. It'll certainly get you well within the ballpark. It's not 100% accurate, but it'll definitely get you in very close. For example, if we're shooting, let's see here, a brightly lit stage, if you're at a concert and you want to do some photography there. So we're going to pump up our ISO to 1600 on the camera, which most cameras can do these days quite well. At ISO 1600, if we've got an aperture of f2.8, we can shoot at 1,000th of a second. If we drop that ISO down to ISO 100 at f2.8, we're at about 1/30th of a second, so we're not going to be able to really capture movement there. So as an example, these will certainly get you in the ballpark very quickly, and they're a really good idea. My favourite solution though is the good old light meter. A lot of different things you can do with these, as far as checking, for example, if you want to get a balance between ambient and flash in your exposure, which we'll show you very shortly. They're great. Also, I don't like many surprises when I'm doing photography. I want to know what the exposure is going to be straight away. Obviously with digital cameras it's very easy to see your photo as you're taking it, but you can achieve a result very quickly with a light meter. So we'll take a little break and we'll set some stuff up and show you how to use your light meter. Okay, and what we're going to start with now is using our light meter to get a consistent exposure across the backdrop. I want the backdrop in this instance to be f8 right the way across with no dark edges, so we're going to use the light meter. This is very hard to do quickly with just using the display and the camera's inbuilt light meter. You get there eventually, but it's very much trial and error. This lets us get there straight away. So I'm going to start over this side, and I'm just going to take a meter reading in front of this light, which comes out at f8, which is what we want. That's great. I'm going to try over this side, trigger the light, and that's showing at f16, which is too high. So I'm just going to bring this down a little bit. We'll try again, and we'll trigger that light. We're at f11, I think one more, and we should get there. And we'll set it to there and try once more. And we'll trigger the flash. Great, that's f8. And once more, just in the middle, which also reads f8. Perfect. Before we even take the shot, we've got the backdrop set. Okay, our second example is using our light meter here to set light ratios very quickly and easily. What I want to achieve is this umbrella set to f5.6, and we'll change the light ratio on this umbrella. Now clearly this is not an ideal lighting setup, but for the sake of this video, for the sake of the exercise, we've just put them here as an example. What I'm also going to be doing is we're going to be doing this measuring manually with the light meter. This one actually does it automatically for you, but as everyone's got something slightly different at home, we're going to do it the manual way. So we'll get started. So what I want to do is check the balance of these lights basically. So I want to get a base reading from this light over here on my left. So what I'll do, two ways to do this. You can actually just hold the light meter like this and use your hand to shield the light coming from this flash. Or on most light meters, you can actually just turn the Invocone in and that achieves the same thing, just point in that direction. You don't need to shield it any further. So we're going to take our first light reading. So I'm just going to hold this up against my nose and trigger the flashes. And that shows us at 5.6, which is perfect. So what I'm going to do now is take this light and turn it up. I want to try and achieve f11 over this side, which is a 4:1 ratio or 2 stops difference. Now in a future podcast, we'll actually show you what these actually light ratios look like. So bearing in mind this is 5.6, I'm going to hold this up this way now, just against my nose, trigger the flash. That's pretty good. That's actually f11 already. So that's our 4:1 ratio or 2 stop difference between the lights. If I turn this down a little bit, what I want to try and achieve now is a 2:1 ratio or 1 stop difference. I want to try and get f8 from this light. So we'll trigger off the flash again and f8, fantastic. Very easy. If I want to get a 1:1 ratio, which is the same lights output from both flashes, get a very even exposure, no shadows, I'll turn this down just a little bit more. We'll try and get that f5.6 on both sides. So I'll trigger the flash again. Fantastic, 5.6, f5.6, just confirm it again on this side. f5.6, once again, before we've even taken the photo, we know exactly what it's going to look like and we can tweak the photo to exactly how we need it before we push the trigger. And then our final example today, what we're going to be showing you is using your light meter to gauge how much of the ambient light is in the exposure and how much light from your flash is contributing to the exposure. The reason you would do this, for example, if you're taking a photograph in front of a window, which always produces a gorgeous soft light, but you want to fill in the shadows a little bit with your flash, but you don't want the flash to overpower the exposure, you just want it to contribute a little bit, you can use the light meter for that. Late afternoon photography, when doing this afternoon shadows, you want to eliminate some shadows on one side, once again use your light meter for that. We're using a Sekonic L558 for this demonstration. This actually has this feature built in, but also the cheaper L358 light meter from Sekonic also does the same thing. The ambient light that we're using today is the video lights, and obviously we're bouncing the flash off the ceiling, but the light meter will still read that bounce flash, and we're bouncing a little bit of light with the flash with the bounce card here onto my face as well to help the light meter. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to take a quick reading. So we'll set the light meter, we'll trip the flash. Good. And what that is telling me is that we've got a 50% balance now between the ambient light and the fill flash. And that 50% would require the camera to be set ISO 100, 30th of a second at f4, as you can see on the graphic on your screen. What I want to do now though is turn the flash up a little bit more, so we can have a little bit more of the flash contributing to the exposure. So I'm going to turn this up to there, set the light meter, we're going to trigger the flash again. Great. Now what this is showing me now is that the flash is contributing 90% to the exposure, and the camera setting would need to be a 30th of a second at f8, once again as you can see on your screen now. So there you go, nice and quick and easy, using your light meter to very quickly know how much of the ambient light you get in the exposure and how much flash you get in your exposure. Quick and easy, can't live without my light meter. They're a great investment, you should get yourself one. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed our podcast today, showing you 4 different ways to obtain the exposure you're wanting, either using your camera's inbuilt light meter, which will be useful for most general photography requirements. You can use tools like the rule of thumb cards inside of your film cases and using the Sunny 16 rule as a rule of thumb. Something a little tiny bit more accurate is your slide rule, which will get you in the ballpark with just a little bit of a tweak along the way, but you'll certainly get within the range you need to be. And of course my preference, which is using the light meter. Get it right the first time before you even take the shot, you know what it's going to look like. Very easy tool to use as well. I hope you've enjoyed our presentation today. If there's anything else that you would like us to share or discuss in the future, please send me an email through our website at timography.net. And until then, we'll see you next time.